The last thing Aldrich Vane remembered was falling asleep in his own bed, in his own modest tower, with his own considerably average human body. 43 years old, slightly soft around the middle, with the kind of face that people described as trustworthy, which he had always suspected was a polite way of saying unremarkable. He woke up face down in mud. This was not unusual for a man of his habits. What was unusual was that the mud was much closer to his face than it should have been, and his hands, when he pushed himself upright, were the wrong color, green, knobbly, with 4 fingers that ended in small black claws. He looked at them for a long moment. Then he looked at the rest of himself, small, compact, dressed in what appeared to be a torn potato sack, belted with a piece of rope. He was sitting in a ditch beside a forest road, and the trees above him were enormous, which meant he was not. He stood up. He was approximately the height of a large dog. Ah, he thought, that's unfortunate. He took stock methodically, because Aldrich Vane had been a scholar for 20 years, and methodical stock-taking was how scholars dealt with catastrophe. Body, goblin. Small, green, functional. Claws present. Teeth, when he ran his tongue across them, were sharp and unpleasant. He appeared to be male, which was a small mercy. Location, forest road, unknown region. Morning light through the trees. Birds. No immediate threats visible. Mind, entirely his own, which was either a blessing or a curse, depending on how one felt about being a 43-year-old man trapped in the body of a creature that most adventurers killed for sport and minor experience points. He checked his pockets, empty except for a small, smooth stone that he didn't remember picking up. He checked his memory for how he had gotten here and found nothing useful, just the ordinary evening of his ordinary life, a cup of tea, a book about transmutation theory, sleep. Transmutation theory. He looked at his green hands. Ironic, he thought. Then something else arrived. Not a thought, more like a letter sliding under a door. Words that assembled themselves in his mind without invitation. Power bond. Passive ability acquired. On contact with any female life form, mutual surge of strength, permanent, growing with the depth of the connection between you. The effect is intensely pleasant to the recipient and grows more so as the bond between you deepens. Note, as your power grows, your body will remember what it was. He read it twice. He looked at his small green hands. He looked at the empty forest road. Well, he thought, that changes the plan somewhat. He picked up a stick, which at his current height felt like a reasonable weapon, and started walking. He heard her before he saw her, the sound of someone moving through undergrowth with the practiced quiet of a person who had learned to move quietly, but hadn't quite gotten there yet. A branch snapping, a muttered word in Elvish that he recognized as a mild oath. Then she stepped onto the road. She was a forest elf, young, perhaps 20 by Elvish reckoning, which meant she could be anywhere between 15 and 150. Tall, lean, with the slightly annoyed expression of someone who had been tracking something for hours and found a goblin instead. She looked at him. He looked at her. She reached for the short bow on her back. Ah, Aldrich thought. Here we go. Wait, he said. In perfect academic Elvish. She froze. Her hand stayed on the bow, but didn't draw. She was staring at him with the expression of someone who has just heard a cat recite poetry. I am not, he said carefully, a typical goblin. Goblins don't speak Elvish, she said, in common tongue, apparently deciding that if the goblin was going to be strange, she might as well use a language she was more comfortable with. Goblins don't generally speak anything more sophisticated than threats and requests for food, Aldrich agreed. I am, in fact, a human scholar who woke up in this body this morning and is having what I would describe as a challenging day. She stared at him. My name is Aldrich Vane. I lectured at the Westmere Academy for 18 years. I have written 4 books on transmutation theory, 2 of which were moderately well received. I would very much appreciate not being shot. A long silence. You're serious, she said, profoundly. She looked him up and down, which, given the height difference, required looking considerably down. He was aware that he cut an unimpressive figure. Green, muddy, holding a stick. I'm Scylla, she said finally, lowering her hand from the bow. I'm a ranger apprentice. I was tracking a wounded deer. I'm sorry to have interrupted. You didn't interrupt. I lost it an hour ago. She crouched down to his level and studied him with frank curiosity. You really are a goblin, so it appears. You're very well spoken for a goblin. Thank you. That's the nicest thing anyone said to me today. And the day began in a ditch. She almost smiled. It was a good almost smile. Aldrich filed it away as a positive sign. Can you prove you're human? She asked. Not currently, though I could quiz you on transmutation theory if that would help establish my academic credentials. She did smile then, briefly, before catching it. What do you want? Aldrich considered. The ability sat in his mind like a warm coal, waiting. He needed to get stronger. He needed skills. He needed, eventually, to find a mage capable of undoing whatever had been done to him. All of that required not being dead, which required allies, which required making a good impression on the first person he met who hadn't immediately tried to kill him. He also needed to explain the ability before he used it, because using it, without explanation, seemed like precisely the kind of thing that led to being shot. I need help, he said, and I have something to offer in return. But I need to explain it first, because if I don't explain it first, it's going to seem very strange. Scylla looked at him for a moment. It's already very strange, she said. Fair, said Aldrich. All right, here's the situation. He explained it all. The ability, the mechanics, the cooldown, the mutual benefit. He kept his tone academic and precise, which he hoped conveyed reasonable scholar rather than suspicious goblin with an agenda. Scylla listened without interrupting, which he appreciated. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment, turning a twig between her fingers. So, she said, if I let you touch my hand, we both get stronger. The strength of the bond depends on, well, on us, on how much genuine connection there is between the people involved. And you learn one of my skills. One per day. I don't choose which, whatever transfers most naturally. And it feels pleasant. According to the description, yes. She looked at him for a long moment. The forest was quiet around them. A bird called somewhere above. That, she said, is either the most elaborate excuse to hold a girl's hand I have ever heard, or you're telling the truth. Aldrich opened his mouth. Hold out your hand, she said. He held out his small green hand. She looked at it for a moment, then placed her fingers over it. The warmth came immediately, rising from the point of contact like heat from a hearthstone. Aldrich felt something settle into place inside him, some gear clicking home, and with it a thread of strength winding into his muscles. Modest, real, undeniable. Scylla made a small sound. Her lips parted. For just a moment her eyes went unfocused, as if something very pleasant had moved through her from the inside out. A faint flush crossed the bridge of her nose. Then she blinked, collected herself with the speed of someone who had decided that whatever just happened was not going to be discussed, and released his hand. She sat back and looked at her own palm. That was, she said, in a carefully controlled voice, not what I expected. What did you expect? Something more goblin-y. She flexed her fingers slowly. I feel different. Stronger, Aldrich confirmed. He could feel it in himself too. His grip on the stick was firmer, his legs steadier, and sitting somewhere new in his mind, like a book that had appeared on a shelf overnight. Forest tracking, apprentice level. He nearly laughed. 20 years of academic scholarship, and he had just learned more about tracking in 1 second than he could have managed in a semester. You got something, Scylla said. It wasn't quite a question. Tracking, apprentice level. She stared at him. I've been working on that for 2 years. I have the knowledge, not the experience. I know how to track. Whether I can physically do it in this body is a separate question. She was quiet for a moment. Then, so if we do this again tomorrow, we both get stronger again. Yes, and the strength of it. It won't always be the same. It grows with the connection between us. A stranger's bond is a spark. A companion's is a flame. Something deeper than that. He paused. I don't know yet. I haven't been in this body long enough to find out. Scylla looked at him for a long moment, with an expression he couldn't quite read. Then she stood up and brushed forest debris from her knees. I have a camp, she said. 1/2 mile east. There's food. Aldrich looked at the empty road in both directions. then at his stick. I accept, he said. They walked. He had to take 3 steps for every one of hers, which was undignified, but she slowed without being asked, which he appreciated. Westmere Academy, she said after a while. My uncle studied there. What did you lecture in? Transmutation theory. The magic of form changing. Shape, substance, conversion between states. She glanced down at him. And you woke up as a goblin. I am aware of the irony, yes. Do you know who did it? Not yet, but I intend to find out. She was quiet for a moment. Then, what do you need to get back to yourself? A sufficiently powerful mage, someone who specializes in body transmutation or soul binding. I need to be strong enough and skilled enough to get to one of them without being killed along the way for being a goblin. That's quite a journey for someone your current size. Hence the plan, said Aldrich. Hence you, if you're willing. Scylla looked ahead at the trees, and the corner of her mouth moved upward just slightly. I'm willing, she said. I was bored of tracking deer anyway.